Namo Dasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Dasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Dasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Tonight I will give more explanations on how to practice the great vehicle of enlightenment. I will explain in sequence the definition, characteristic, function, manifestation, proximate cause and reflection of each parami or perfection. Perfection of giving. Number 1. The perfection of giving is the volition of relinquishing oneself and one's belongings, accompanied by great compassion and the knowledge of skillful means. And here it should be mentioned that accompaniment by great compassion and the knowledge of skillful means is the distinguishing feature of the characteristic of each perfection. For the perfection of giving, etc., which occur in the mental continuities of bodhisattvas, are always accompanied by great compassion and the knowledge of skillful means. It is this which makes them perfections. The perfection of giving has the characteristic of relinquishing. Its function is to dispel greed for things that can be given away. Its manifestation is non-attachment, or the achievement of prosperity in a favorable state of existence. An object that can be relinquished is its proximate cause. The perfection of giving should be reflected upon thus. Possessions such as fields, land, bullion, gold, cattle, buffaloes, slaves, children, wives, etc., bring tremendous harm to those who become attached to them. Because they stimulate desire, they are wanted by many people. They can be confiscated by gangs and thieves. They spark off disputes and create enemies. They are basically insubstantial. To acquire and protect them, one has to harass others. When they are destroyed, many kinds of calamities such as sorrow, lamentation, etc. follow. And because of attachment to these things, the mind becomes upset with the state of stinginess, and as a result, one is reborn in the plane of misery. On the other hand, one act of relinquishing these things is one step to safety. Thus, one should relinquish them with diligence. Further, when a suppliant asks for something, a bodhisattva should reflect, he is my intimate friend, for he divulges his own secret to me. He is my teacher, for he teaches me, when you go you have to abandon all. Going to the world beyond, you cannot even take your own possessions. He is a companion helping me to remove my belongings from this world, which, like a blazing house, is blazing with the fire of death. In removing this, he helps me to get rid of the worry it costs me. He is my best friend, for by enabling me to perform this noble act of giving, he helps me to accomplish the most eminent and difficult of all achievements, the attainment of the plane of the Buddhas. He should further reflect. He honors me with a lofty task. Therefore, I should acknowledge that honor faithfully. And since life is bound to end, I shall give even when not asked, much more when asked. And those with a lofty temperament search for someone to give to, but he has come to me on his own accord, because of my merit. And bestowing a gift upon a suppliant will be beneficial to me as well as to him. And just as I will benefit myself, so should I benefit all the world. And if there were no suppliants, how would I fulfill the purpose of giving? And everything I acquire should be obtained but only to give others. And when will beggars feel free to take my belongings on their own accord, without asking? And how can I be dear and agreeable to beggars, and how can they be dear and agreeable to me? How can I give and after giving be elated, exultant, filled with rapture and joy? And how can beggars be so on my account? How can my inclination to giving be lofty? How can I give to beggars even without being asked, knowing their heart's desire? And since there are goods and beggars have come, not to give them something will be a great deception on my part. And how I can relinquish my own life and limbs to those who ask for them? He should arouse a desire to give things away without concern by reflecting. Good riddance to the one who gives without his concern. Just as the boomerang, riddance to the one who throws it without his concern. If a dear person asks for something, he should arouse joy by reflecting. One who is dear is asking me for something. If an indifferent person asks for something, he should arouse joy by reflecting. Surely, if I give him something, he will become my friend, since giving to those who ask wins their affection. And if a hostile person asks for something, he should be especially happy, thinking, my foe is asking me for something, though he is hostile towards me. By means of this gift, he will surely become my dear friend. Thus, he should give to neutral and hostile people in the same way he gives to dear people, having first aroused loving kindness and compassion. If due to their cumulative force, states of greed should arise for things which can be given away, the bodhisattva aspiring should reflect. Well now, good man, when you made the aspiration for full enlightenment, did you not surrender this body as well as the merit, gain in relinquishing it, for the sake of helping all beings? Attachment to external objects is like the breathing of an elephant. Therefore, you should not be attached to anything. Suppose there is a great medicine tree, and someone in need of its roots takes away its roots. Someone in need of its shoots, bark, trunk, limbs, hardwood, branches, foliage, flowers, or fruits, takes its shoots, bark, trunk, etc. The tree will not be assailed by such thoughts as, they are taking away my belongings. In the same way, when I have undertaken to exert myself for the welfare of all the world, I should not arouse even the subtlest wrong thought over this wretched, ungrateful, impure body, which I give entrusted to the service of others. And besides, what distinction can be made between the internal material elements of the body and the external material elements of the body? They are both subject to inevitable breaking up dispersal and dissolution. This is only confused bridle. This is only confused bridle the adherence to this body as this is my, this is I, this is myself. I should have no more concern over my own hands, feet, eyes, and flesh than over external things. Instead, I should arouse the thought to surrender them to others. Let those who need them take them away. As he reflects in this way, he resolved upon full enlightenment, without concern for his body or life. His bodily, vocal, and mental actions will easily become fully purified. When his bodily, vocal, and mental actions, along with his livelihood, became purified, he abides in the practice of the true way, and though his skill means in regard to gain and loss, he is able to benefit all beings to an even greater extent by relinquishing material gifts and by giving the gift of fearlessness and the gift of the true Dhamma. This is the method of reflecting of the perfection of giving. A bodhisattva not only reflects on how to fulfill the perfection of giving, but also put it into practice. When our bodhisattva was King Visandra, he gave away his son and daughter to a bad Brahmin, and his wife to Sakagay in disguise of a Brahmin. Our bodhisattva not only gave away the external belongings such as his beloved wife and children, but also gave away his life in charity. Once our bodhisattva was a prince. One day he went to a forest and saw a tigress and her 3 cubs, which were near death because of starvation. On seeing this, strong compassion arose in the prince. In order to save them, he climbed up a precipice and jumped down, offering his body as food to them. This is a kind of supreme perfection. When our bodhisattva was an animal, he could also practice this kind of perception, this kind of perfection. Once, when our bodhisattva was a hare, it joyfully jumped into a fire kindled by King Saka in disguise of a Brahmin, with the intention to offer its body as food to him. Perfection of virtue. Number 2. As regards the perfection of virtue, it is good conduct of body and speech, accompanied by great compassion and the knowledge of skillful means. In denotation, it is the abstinence from what should not be done, the volition to do what should be done, etc. It has the characteristic of composing silana, coordinating samadhana, and establishing pradithana are also mentioned as its characteristic. Its function is to dispel moral depravity, or its function is blameless conduct. Its manifestation is moral purity. Shame and moral dread are its proximate cause. The perfection of virtue should be reflected upon as follows. Even the waters of the Ganges cannot wash away the stain of hatred. Yet the water of virtue is able to do so. Even yellow sandalwood cannot cool the fever of lust. Yet virtue is able to remove it. Virtue is the unique adornment of the good, surpassing the adornments cherished by ordinary people, such as necklaces, diadems, and earrings. It is a sweet-scented fragrance superior to incense as it pervades all directions and is always in place. A supreme magical spell which which wins the homage of the deities in powerful gains, etc. A staircase ascending to the world of the gods, to the heaven of the four great gains, etc. A means for achievement the jhanas and psychic powers, a highway leading to the great city of Nibbana, the perfectly enlightened Buddhas, and as a means for the fulfillment of all one's wishes and desires. It surpasses the tree of plenty and the wish-fulfilling gem. And the Exalted One has said, the heart resolution of the virtuous bhikkhus succeeds on account of his purity, in Gondra Nikaya. And if a bhikkhu should wish, may I be dear and agreeable to my companions in the holy life, revered and esteemed, he should be perfect in fulfilling the rules of conduct, Majjhima Nikaya. And wholesome rules of the conduct, Ananda, lead to freedom from remorse, in Gondra Nikaya. And those householders are the five benefits of the virtuous man's endowment with virtue, Digha Nikaya. Thus, the noble qualities of virtue should be reflected upon by way of these suttas, and the danger in moral depravity by way of such suttas as the Agikhandopama Sutta, the smiley of the mass of fire. The following is a summary of the Agikhandopama Sutta mentioned in the Saddaka Nibbana in Gondra Nikaya. And one day the Buddha was towering in the country of Kosala, accompanied by many bhikkhus. On seeing a blazing fire at one place, he left the highway and sat down on the seat of four-folded rope, prepared by the Venerable Ananda at the foot of a tree. Then the Buddha addressed the bhikkhus, Bhikkhus, which will be better to sit and lie down embracing a writhing flame, or to sit and lie down embracing a damsel? To this question the bhikkhus responded unwisely that it will be better to sit and lie down embracing a damsel. To this the Buddha explained that for an immoral person it would be better to sit and lie down embracing a raging flame, for it will cause suffering for only one existence, whereas embracing a damsel will lead them to lower realm. Then the Buddha continued to ask the bhikkhus the following questions. Would it be better to be tormented by a strong man who wraps up one's legs with a leather tether until the skin, flesh, muscles and bones are all done and crushed, or to take delight in the homage paid by the faithful? Would it be better to have one's chest pierced by a strong man with a sharp spear, or to be paid homage by faithful? Would it be better to have your body enveloped in a red hot iron plate by a strong man, or to make use of the rope offered by the faithful? Would it be better to have your mouth opened and half held up with a red hot iron prop, and to have a burning hot lamp of iron thrown into it so that it burns up all the internal organs along its way to the lower orifice of the body, or to partake of the almsfood offered by the faithful? Would it be better to be seized firmly by the head or shoulder by a strong man and forcefully pushed down to sit or lie down on an iron bed which is burning red hot, or to make use of the couch offered by the faithful? Would it be better to be held upside down by a strong man and plunged into a big pan of boiling iron, or to dwell in a monastery offered by the faithful. To all these 6 later questions, the bhikkhus answered unwisely as they did to the first question, and the Buddha gave answers similar to that given to the first one, namely that for an immoral person it will be better to have one's legs torn and crushed, to be pierced by a sharp spear, etc., for they will cause suffering for only one existence, whereas to take delight in the homage paid by the faithful, etc., will lead to the woeful realms of the intense suffering, where they will remain for a long time. The Buddha ended his discourse with these words: in order to bring utmost benefit to the faithful donors who offer requisites, and to make one's life advantageous in the order, a bhikkhu should practice the 3 trainings of virtuous conduct, concentration, and wisdom. A bhikkhu wishing his own welfare as well as that of others must be ever mindful and diligent. At the end of the discourse, 60 immoral bhikkhus vomited hot blood. 60 bhikkhus who had infringed light disciplinary rules left the order for household life. 60 bhikkhus who had led a pure life attained arhataship. This is a summary of the Akikhandopama Sutta. Further, virtue should be reflected upon as the basis for rapture and joy, as giving immunity from fear of self-reproach, the reproach of others, temporal punishment, and an evil destination after death, as praised by the wise, as the root cause for the freedom from remorse, as the base for security, and as the surpassing the achievements of high birth, wealth, sovereignty, long life, beauty, status, kinsmen, and friends. For great rapture and joy arise in the virtuous man when he reflects his own accomplishment in virtue. I have done what is wholesome. I have done what is good. I have built myself a shelter from fear. The virtuous man does not blame himself, and otherwise men do not blame him, and he does not encounter the dangers of temporal punishment or an evil destination after death. To the contrary, the wise praise the noble character of the virtuous man, and the virtuous man is not subject to the remorse which arises in the immoral man when he thinks, I have committed evil, wicked, sinful deeds. And virtue is the supreme basis for security, since it is the foundation for diligence, a blessing and a means for achieving great benefits, such as preventing the loss of wealth, etc. Accomplishment in virtue surpasses birth in a good family, since a virtuous man of low birth deserves to be worshipped, even by great powerful gains. Virtue surpasses material wealth, for it cannot be confiscated by the thieves. Follows one to the world beyond, produces great fruit, and adds the foundation for such qualities as serenity, etc. Because it enables one to achieve supreme sovereignty over one's own mind. Virtue surpasses the sovereignty of gains, etc. And because of their virtue, beings attain sovereignty in their respective orders. Virtue is superior even to life, for it is said that a single day in the life of the virtuous is better than 100 years of life devoid of virtue. Dhammapada, verse 110. And being like the disavowal of the training in the holy life, is called spiritual death. Majjhima Nikaya. Virtue surpasses the achievement of beauty, for it makes one beautiful even to one's enemies, and it cannot be banished by the adversities of aging and sickness. As the foundation for distinguished states of happiness, virtue surpasses such distinguished dwellings as palaces, mansions, etc., in such distinguished social positions as that of a king, prince, and general. Because it promotes one's highest welfare and follows one to the world beyond, virtue surpasses kinsmen and friends, even those who are close and affectionate. Again, in accomplishing the difficult task of the self-protection, virtue is superior to troops of elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry, as well as to such devices as mantras, spells, and blessings, for it depends on oneself, does not depend on others, and has a great sphere of influence. Hence it is said, Dhamma protects the one who lives by Dhamma Thera Gatha. When one reflects in this way upon the numerous noble qualities of virtue, one's unfulfilled achievement of virtue will become fulfilled, and one's unpurified virtue will become purified. If, due to their cumulative force, states antithetical to virtue, such as aversion, should arise from time to time, the aspirant should reflect, did you not make the resolution to win full enlightenment? One defective in virtue cannot even succeed in mundane affairs, much less in supramundane matters. You should reach the peak of virtue, for virtue is the foundation for supreme enlightenment, the foremost of all achievement. You should always be well behaved, safeguarding your virtue perfectly, more carefully than a hen safeguarding its eggs. Further, by teaching the Dhamma, you should help beings to enter and reach maturity in the three vehicles. But the word of morally dubious man is no more reliable than the remedy of a doctor who does not consider what is suitable for his patients. How can I be trustworthy so that I can help beings to enter and reach maturity in the three vehicles? I must be pure in character and virtue. How can I acquire the distinguished attainments such as the jhanas, etc., so that I will be capable of helping others and of fulfilling the perfection of wisdom, etc.? The distinguished attainments such as the jhanas, etc., are not possible without purification of virtue. Therefore, virtue should be made perfectly pure. Perfection of renunciation. Number 3. As regards the perfection of renunciation, it is the act of consciousness which occurs renouncing sense pleasures and existence, preceded by the perception of the unsatisfactoriness. They involve love, accompanied by great compassion and the knowledge of skillful means. It has the characteristic of departing from sense pleasures and existence. Its function is to verify the unsatisfactoriness of spiritual urgency. Its function is to verify the unsatisfactoriness they involve. Its manifestation is the withdrawal from them. A sense of spiritual urgency, samvega, is its proximate cause. The perfection of renunciation should be reflected upon by first discerning the dangers in the household life. According to the text, household life is constricted with duties towards one's wife and children, a path for the dust of passion, etc. As explained in the Dukkha Khanda Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, one should dwell upon the fact that sensual objects are more of worry and lamentation than of the enjoyment and so on. Upon the suffering from contact with heat, cold, flies, mosquitoes, flies, wind, sun, reptiles, fleas, insects, etc. While in quest of sensual objects, as motivated by sense desires, upon pain and distress, when one's laborious quest for sense objects ends up fruitless, upon worry and anxiety for their security against the five enemies, after they have been acquired, upon great suffering caused by terrible wars waged through desire for sense objects, upon the 32 kinds of several punishment meted out in this life to those who have committed crimes through sense desires, upon the terrible suffering in the life beyond in the four realms of miserable existences. This is the reflection on the perfection of renunciation. Here I shall relate the Bhisa Jataka in brief to illustrate the perfection of renunciation. Once upon a time, a Brahmin youth, Mahakinchana by name, who was born in the city of Varanasi, went forth in renunciation into a forest, together with 10 companions, including his younger brothers, a younger sister, a male servant, a female servant, and a friend. They made their lodging at a suitable place near a lotus pond and lived on gathered fruits. In the beginning, they all went out together to look for fruits, talking to one another. They behaved like the town folk or villagers, not like forest dwellers. To stop this unpleasant situation, the eldest brother Mahakinchana said, I alone will go out for fruits. You all stay behind to practice Dhamma in peace. Then the other brothers said, You are the chief of us all. It is not proper for you to gather fruits. The sister and the female servant should not do so either, for they are women. But the rest eight of us will do that by dance. This was agreeable to everyone, and the remaining 8 male persons gathered fruits on rotation to feed them all. As time went by, they became so content that they did not care for fruits, but took lotus sprouts from the nearby pond and shared among themselves. The one on duty brought lotus sprouts into the leaf-roofed hut and divided them into 11 portions. The oldest of them took his portion first, and after striking the stone drum, went back to his place to eat it peacefully, and carried on with his practice. When the next senior member heard the sound of the stone drum, he took his share and struck the drum and drum. In this manner they took their food one after another, went back to their place to eat, and continued to practice. Thus they did not see one another unless there was any special reason. As their practice was so several, it caused Saka's abode tremble. The king of Devas thought of the reason and came down to know it. He was then doubtful whether these people were really detached from sensual pleasures or not. In order to investigate the matter, he kept the eldest brother's share of food hidden by his supernormal power for 3 days continuously. When the eldest brother came to take his share on the first day, he did not see and thought that it must be left out through forgetfulness. He then said nothing and went back to his place to continue his meditation. On the second day also he found his share missing, thinking that his share was purposely left out as a punishment because of some misunderstanding that he was guilty of something. He remained quiet as on the first day. On the third day, when he did not find his share, he thought that he should apologize if he had been guilty, and in the evening he summoned the others by striking the stone drum. He said, "Why did you not give my share of food? Please speak out. If I have some guilt, I will tender my apology to you." Then the first younger brother stood up and after giving his respect to the eldest brother said, "Sir, could I get your permission to speak only for myself?" On getting the permission, he took an oath, saying, "Sir, if I had stolen your share of food, may I come into possession of horses, cattle, silver, gold, and a beautiful wife. Now at this place, and stay with my family, enjoying a full mundane life." This form of oath suggests that as much as objects of desire give us pleasure, when we are in possession of them, we feel grieved and distressed when we are bereft of them. The oath was taken to despise the objects of desire. To him the eldest brother said, "You have taken a very severe oath. I believe you did not take my food. Go and sit in your place." The rest of the group, covering their ears, also said, "Brother, please do not say so. Your word is very serious and terrible." They covered their ears because as meditators they found sense pleasures disgusting to them. Sensuality was so dreadful that they could not bear even to hear something associated with it. Then the second younger brother said, "Sir, if I had stolen your lotus sprouts, may I become one who wears flowers, puts on the sandalwood paste from Kasi, has many children, and who is very much involved and attached to sensuality." In this way, the remaining 8 persons took an oath individually. In this Jataka, the ascetic Mahakinchana, leader of the group, was the Bodhisattva, and the rest were destined to become foremost disciples in their own right. That was how our Bodhisattva and his followers practiced the perfection of renunciation. Perfection of wisdom. Number 4. As regards the perfection of wisdom, it is the comprehension of the general and specific characteristics of the Dhammas, accompanied by great compassion and the knowledge of the skillful minds. It has the characteristic of penetrating the real specific nature of Dhammas, or the characteristic of sure penetration, like the penetration of an arrow shot by a skillful archer. Its function is to eliminate the objective field, like a lamp. Its manifestation is non-confusion, like a guide in a forest. Concentration on the Four Noble Truths is its proximate cause. For the perfection of wisdom, the noble qualities of wisdom should be considered as follows. Without wisdom, the virtues such as giving do not become purified and cannot perform their respective functions. Just as without life, the bodily organism loses its luster and cannot perform its proper activities. And as without consciousness, the sense faculties cannot exercise their functions in their respective spheres. Just so, without wisdom, the faculties such as faith, etc. cannot perform their functions. Wisdom is the chief cause for the practice of the other perfections. For when their wisdom eyes open up, the great bodhisattvas give even their own limbs and organs without extolling themselves and disparaging others. Like medicine trees, they give devoid of discrimination, fields with joy through all the three times. By means of wisdom, the act of relinquishing exercise with skillful means and practice for the welfare of others attains the stages of perfection. But giving for one's own benefit is like an investment. Again, without wisdom, virtue cannot be saved from the defilements of craving, etc. And therefore cannot even reach purification. Much less serve is the foundation for the qualities of an omniscient Buddha. Only the man of wisdom clearly recognizes the dangers in household life, in the strength of sense pleasure, and in the round of rebirth, and sees the benefits in going forth, in attaining jhanas, and in realizing nirvana. And he alone goes into homelessness, develops the jhanic attainments, and directed towards nirvana, establishes others therein. Energy devoid of wisdom does not accomplish the purpose desired, since it is wrongly aroused, and it is better not to arouse energy at all than to arouse it in the wrong way. But when energy is conjoined with wisdom, there is nothing it cannot accomplish. If equipped with proper means, again only the man of wisdom can patiently tolerate the wrongs of others, not the dull-witted man. In the man lacking wisdom, the wrongs of others only provoke impatience. But for the wise, they all his patience into play and make it grow even stronger. The wise men, having understood the three noble truths as they really are, their causes and opposites, never speaks deceptively to others. The bodhisattva will only realize directly the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, upon his attainment of Buddhahood. So too, having fortified himself with the power of wisdom, the wise man in his 42 forms in unshakable determination to undertake all perfections. Only the man of wisdom is skillful in providing for the welfare of all beings, without discriminating between dear people, neutrals, and enemies. And only by means of wisdom can we remain indifferent to the vicissitudes of the world, such as gain and loss, without being affected by them. In this way, one should reflect upon the noble qualities of wisdom recognizing it to be the cause for the purification of all the perfections. Furthermore, without wisdom there is no achievement of vision, and without the achievement of vision there can be no accomplishment in virtue. One lacking virtue and wisdom cannot achieve concentration, and without concentration one cannot even secure one's own welfare. For it is through the spiritual power of wisdom the great beings established in the four foundations of wisdom, truth, giving, and serenity benefit the world with the four visions of beneficence, of giving, gentle speech, beneficial conduct, and impartiality. Help beings enter the path to emancipation and bring their faculties to maturity. Through the power of wisdom, again they are devoted to the investigation of the aggregates, sense bases, etc. Fully comprehend the process of origination and the cessation in accordance with the actuality. Develop the qualities of giving, etc. to the stages of the distinction and penetration, and perfect the training of bodhisattvas. Thus the perfection of wisdom should be reinforced by comprehending the noble qualities with their numerous modes and constituents. The Samoha Vinodani commentary to the Vibhanga gives 7 ways of developing wisdom. Number 1, asking the wise again and again. Number 2, making objects both inside and outside the body pure. Number 3, bringing the faculties such as faith, etc. into perfect balance. Number 4, avoiding persons without wisdom. Number 5, associating with the wise. Number 6, reflecting on the nature of Dhamma, which is the result of profound wisdom. Number 7, having the inclination towards developing wisdom in all 4 postures. The commentary of Majjhima Nikaya states that bodhisattvas go forth under the Buddhas, purifying their virtue, learn the Buddha's teachings, practice the meditative life, and develop insight knowledge up to the knowledge of equanimity about formations. This is the highest insight knowledge a bodhisattva can attain before he becomes a fully enlightened Buddha. Now the Buddha's teaching is still extant, and it provides you the rarest opportunity to cultivate different stages of insight knowledge, up to the knowledge of equanimity about formations, if you want to be a bodhisattva. But if you wish only for liberation, you should at least practice samatha and vipassana meditation and strive to attain Sotapaddi Magga and Sotapaddi Phala in this life, so that your life as a human being and your meeting with Buddha's teaching are not spent in vain. Tonight I shall stop my talk here. I will give more explanations on the other types of perfection in my next talk. May you attain Nibbana soon. Any question?
His question is that during our practice, very often we confront this concept of the ultimate nature. If ignorance is our ultimate nature, is an ultimate nature. Ultimate nature. If ignorance is ultimate nature, how can we eradicate, stop our ignorance? If ignorance is not our ultimate nature, how come it is attaching to us?
In Khandawaka Sanyuta Buddha dot Samadhi Bhikkhue Bhaveta Samahito Bhikkhue Bhikkhu Yatha Buddham Bhajanati, etc. Bhikkhus, you should cultivate concentration. If you have enough concentration, you will see the Dhammas as they really are. So concentration is very important. Because wisdom and delusion both are opposite. If there is delusion, ignorance, wisdom cannot occur. If there is wisdom occur, then delusion, ignorance will disappear. So for wisdom, to possess wisdom, concentration is the proximate cause.
After we develop wisdom, and then
ignorance will disappear.
His question was, if like a field, a plain, all wild grass grow from it. If we practice, then we can pluck out all the weeds, the wild grass. Then we become Buddha, and then we become Arahat. Then we become Buddha. For example, he said, like on a field, a plain, there are grass that grow, and then we practice, and we pull the weeds out, like defilement, like we pull away our defilement. Then after all defilement gone, then we attain Buddhahood, or Arahatship. Then is it possible for an Arahat or Buddha, the grass or the defilement grow again?
Not possible. According to our Theravada Vidika, it is not possible. Because they completely cease. All defilements completely cease when the attained Arahatship or enlightened one. When he became enlightened one.
He want to ask your Venerable the meaning of the ultimate enlightenment. Yeah. He want to ask you the meaning of this Samma Sambuddha Dasa, the meaning of the terms.
Samma Sambuddha means nearly say Mahabodhi. Great body jnana, especially referring Arhata Mega jnana, Arhata Phala jnana of Buddha. The meaning is he penetrates the Dhammas without any teacher. By himself he penetrates all the Dhammas. All Dhamma means there are 5 types. We call Nyaya Dhammas. Sankhara, Vigara, Lakkhana, Nibbana, Piññati. So in short, these are all Four Noble Truths, different types of concepts. Sankhara, Vigara, 5 Vigara Rupas. 5 Rupas, 5 types of Vigara Rupas. Bodily intimation, verbal intimation, lightness, softness, and pliancy. Vigara. Lakkhana means 4 Lakkhana Rupas. Upachaya, Sandati, Jarada, Nichada. Sankhara, Vigara, Lakkhana, Nibbana. Sankhara means all Sankhara Dhammas, all Namas, including real 18 Rupas. This is Sankhara. So in short, they are Four Noble Truths. Maybe Sankhara, Vigara, Lakkhana, Nibbana, Piññati. Piññati means different concepts like Pathavi Kasina, Kasinas, Anabana, etc. 4 Brahma Viharas, etc. Maybe different types of concepts.
修行。Her question is that if we want to practice, how do we start?
Please come to Myanmar.
She said she'd been to Burma, but she did not meet you and she did not learn. She'll go again? She said she already went to Burma, but she did not meet you. But she did not learn.
Maybe that girl know my address. Please ask her.
She says she does not teach her.
But samatha meditation, first you should try. Firstly, you should try purification of bhaju. Secondly, you should try one of samatha meditation practice, concentration practice. If you successful concentration practice, then you should try to discern mentality, materiality and their causes. And then you should try to see the nature of impermanent suffering and not self. So step by step you must go.
She said she will go to Burma when there is chance.
Yes. Sharing merit. Idame bunya aswakya waha hodu idame bunya nibbana sa pachyo hodu idame bunya sabha sadhana pajema desabe mesama punya baga labandu sadhu sadhu sadhu